Salvete discípuli, soy el Tutorísimo, tu profesor favorito, y en el día de hoy vamos a ver the Unit 3, the secondary sector, using these notes and the presentation I am about to show you. So, let's go. Here we are with the Unit 3, the secondary sector. And if this works, you should remember that the secondary sector is the sector of the economy that involves or includes all the activities related to the transformation of raw materials into manufactured products. Raw materials are materias primas, manufactured products, productos manufacturados. So all these activities lie within this secondary sector. What are the parts or the episodes that we're going to study? First, the energy production. Second, the industry, which is the most important part of this secondary sector. And finally, the construction. Since we or you have been already assessed in the first and the third points, I'm going to focus more on the second one, on the industry. But let's do it in order. So let's start with the energy production. What is the energy production? Is the transformation of the energy sources into heat, but mostly into electricity. So that's and that is what powers all the machines or all the facilities that are needed to perform the economic activity. How do they do that? Well, there are several processes, but the most basic one is the electricity generation from an electric turbine. As you can see here, some kind of we need to transform the kinetic power into electricity or electric power, and we do this with this electric generator. And here in this diagram you can see it in a very basic feature. This is an alternator, and this is a wire loop, and it spins inside a magnetic field. When this happens, the electrons move through this wire loop, so electricity is generated. The electrons move here, and electricity is just the movement of the electrons. And this is how, in a very basic way, this is how electricity is generated in most of the power plants. If you need further information, you can ask your physics teacher. So, how do we do this? With several types of energy sources. These energy sources are the ones that can produce the light, also the heat and the power to move different types of machinery. And we classify them depending on their capacity to be naturally renewed. We are going to start with the renewable ones, the renewable sources of energy, which are the ones that are inexhaustible. So we will not run out of them in short or mid-term. The first type is the solar energy source, which comes from the sun, and it's harnessed in this type of solar panels. Okay, this is a power plant in China, but there is also this type of solar power plants using these mirrors and this tower. For example, this one in California in the United States. Then we have the aeolian, which comes from the wind and is harnessed with these windmills. Here we have some examples of them in different parts of the world. Then the geothermal, which is produced from the heat inside of the earth. This is usually got in areas which have geysers or geysers. I don't know how to pronounce this. This is in Iceland, for example. Then the tidal and wave, which is produced by the tides and the waves. Here the turbines, the electric generators are below this dam, okay, which is also a road. and the hydroelectric or hydraulic energy source, which is generated by waterfalls. Here, this is a artificial waterfall created by this dam. This is the biggest dam in the world, the Three Gorges Dam in China. And finally, the biomass, which are vegetable products. They usually burn vegetable products and they get this heat to power up the plant. This is one in Japan. After this, we have the non-renewable sources, and this means that they will eventually become exhausted through constant use. It will remain for a long time, but eventually in 100 years or 200 years, we will run out of them. The main forms are to get energy from these non-renewable sources are the thermal, which uses coal as the fuel, for example this, oil, or, well, this is an oil field, which you can get oil from beneath the earth crust in the land or in the sea. And finally, also natural gas, and finally the nuclear. In the nuclear power plants, we get heat to produce this steam to power up the generators by splitting uranium atoms in a reactor. Okay, here this is the reactor of the nuclear power plant of Trillo in Guadalajara. So, what is the share of these energy sources in the world electricity production? Here, as you can see, around 3/4, around more than 70% of the electricity produced in the world comes from non-renewable energy sources, and the other 25% comes from the renewable ones. And this is the evolution of the use of these sources throughout history till today. And the main problem of these non-renewable sources is the pollution because of the combustion of these energy sources. So here you have the summary. If you need to read it slowly, you can, in a slower way, you can pause this video, but I'm going to move on to the next point, which is the industry. What is industry? It comprises the transformation of raw materials into manufactured products. It's the making of new products, of new objects by the transformation of raw materials. Usually it is considered to be a synonym of the secondary sector because the industry is the most important activity within this sector. Que me muero. But first, before talking about the industry, we have to know about a bit about the historical development of industry. You will study this in the next year in the 4th course, but here we need to do a bit of a summary. Dios. So there are 3 industrial revolutions. Many people says that there are 4, but we are only going to study the 3 first ones. The first industrial revolution happened in started at the second half of the 18th century in Great Britain. Why? Because there was a lot of scientific advances. The most important one, the James Watt's steam engine. This could transform the heat from the steam into movement, into kinetic energy. So he could power up any kind of machine you can imagine. And this led to the birth of the mechanized labor, to the factory, the machines powered up by coal, which was the energy source that powered up the steam engines. So here we have a textile factory in Great Britain, which was the country where this first industrial revolution happened. These machines were applied mostly to the textiles and the iron industry. This is a a cotton factory, and this revolution started to spread slowly throughout Europe. This steam engine was also applied to transportation, and here is because this revolution ended by the first half of or lasted until the first half of the 19th century, and this steam machine was also applied to transportation, as I said. For example, the first train, the Robert Stephenson's rocket in 1829. Then we have the second industrial revolution starting in the second half of the 19th century until the first half of the 20th century. Here, oil and electricity were the most important energy sources, yet coal was also widely used. The most important inventions were the combustion engine, which is the one that uses the cars, for example, is an engine powered up by oil instead of steam or coal, and finally the assembly line production. This is it. This is an assembly line which was first used by Henry Ford in his car factory, the Ford Motor Company. In this assembly line, every worker, which was located in one step of the assembly line, had only one job. Maybe he has to to set the wheel of the car, or the steering wheel, or the lights, but every worker did the same job in every of these cars. The cars were moving forward, and every worker had a specific duty within the chain of production here. So this led to a huge increase in productivity. So, and this second industrial revolution was more focused on consumer goods industries, mostly in the automobile, and this happened in all of the developed world, but mostly in the United States. This is the first car made using the assembly line production system, the Ford Model T, in 1908. And finally, we have the third industrial revolution. From 1950 onwards is the revolution of the information and automation. The sources of energy, we are still using the coal and the petrol and the oil, but there are another ones that are added, the nuclear and the alternative sources of energy, the ones that I have just talked about in the previous point. And the most important industries are these high-tech industries: electronics, microelectronics, information technologies, these all computer-based industries. This is actually the ENIAC, the first computer that was assembled in 1946. And nowadays the factories, most of them are fully automated. That means that robots are taking over the jobs of the people. So after this, we have to talk about the classification of industrial activities. We can classify the industry in three types according to their origin and characteristics: basic industries here, capital goods industries, and consumer goods industries. The basic industries make the first changes to the raw materials to provide the energy or the half-finished materials that later will be used by producing other products. That is, they make a first change. So they don't produce a fully manufactured product, but they make a product that will be used as a raw material by another industry. That is why it is called basic industry. For example, steel and iron. They get the iron ore and they make pieces of iron that later will be used by the construction industry, for example. Or, I don't know, the petrochemical industry, they take the crude oil and they produce refined oil, and that refined oil will be later used to create different kind of, I don't know, kerosene or diesel, and different types of, I don't know how to say this word in English, combustibles. And later we have capital goods industries. These industries make the second changes in order to prepare the products that supply tools to companies. So these capital goods industries create all these products that are machinery, equipment, electronics, or even information technology that will be later used by the rest of the industries to produce the final products, which are made by the consumer good industries. These ones manufacture products that are to be sold directly to the consumer, which is most of the industries: pharmaceutical, textile, footwear, food, high technology, furniture, blah 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 blah, whatever you can imagine. And the industries are also classified in heavy and light industries. This is according to the volume of raw materials used. The light industries are small in scale and they only need a limited amount of capital and raw materials, yet the heavy industries, they involve big plants and they need a lot of money, a lot of capital investment, and their products are not oriented to the consumer but to other industries. They are business oriented. For example, we have what kind of industries do we have here? This is the steel industry, which is a basic industry, the petrochemical industry, another basic industry, microchips industry, again a basic one, pharmaceutical. This could be either basic or consumer goods industry. Textile industry, which is this type of industry is a basic industry because this textile will be later used by the confection industry. This is a consumer goods industry. For example, the textile, the footwear industry, and the food industry, because these products, for example, these Oreo cookies, are going to be sold directly to the customers, to us. So this is the summary, and let's move the summary for the first 2 points of industry. Let's move on to the factors for industry location. These factors are the conditions for the location of the industry. This means that if you want to, or if a businessman or a businesswoman wants to set up a new factory, he has to or she has to take into account several factors. What are these factors? In the notes you have traditional factors and current factors, but I think it's better to see it here in this diagram. So the choice of a factory location takes into account the location of the materials, because remember, what does a businessman want when creating a factory? Money. So if he is able to reduce the cost, he's going to do it. So the factories are going to try, or the location of the factories is going to are usually next to the materials, okay, where the raw materials are, because to reduce the transport cost, next to the markets, so where the markets are, where the products are going to be sold, so that is why the industries are usually located near cities. They are going to be next to the energy sources. This was a very important factor at the first days of the industry, in the first and the second industrial revolutions, but nowadays, since the transportation of energy is very cheap, this is not an important factor anymore. Also, they need workforce, so that is why, also same as the market, this is why industry is usually located next to the big cities, because there is where the workforce is. And then another factors that can be proximity to ports, to transport routes, to if they need high-skilled workers, they're going to be next to a university, etc, etc, etc. And finally, the great industrial areas. These industrial areas, the great industrial areas in the world, They have been changing throughout the history, throughout the development of the industrial revolutions, but we can talk about the original industrial areas, the one from the first and the second industrial revolution, which are the center of England, because here these areas are the ones in which coal, which was the main energy source in the first industrial revolution and then in the second, was very abundant. The center of England, the center of Germany, which is the Ruhr mining area, for example, the north of France, or the eastern part of the United States of America, which was where the first cars were made. But these areas are usually now abandoned or recovered. Why? Because the industry has been displaced to another countries with where the costs are lower. Then we have the contemporary industrial areas, in which we have different types of industrial areas. For example, we have centers for advanced technology in the most developed countries. This is Silicon Valley in the United States. This is the headquarters of Apple, the Apple Corporation. We have also high-tech industries. For example, this is the NASA Vehicle Assembly Building in Florida in the United States. If you have watched the Don't Look Up movie, there is one of these that appears in this movie. Then the usual concentration of industries in the countries nowadays are this concentration of light industries outside of the urban centers in industrial parks or industrial states, what we call polígonos industriales, and this is one in China, and this is one in Spain, and as you know, we have one in Rivas, el Polígono Santa Ana. And finally, there are mature or low technology industries that are located in emerging or underdeveloped countries, for example here in Bangladesh, Dhaka, which is the capital, because they require abundant but low-cost labor force. So most of these industries are located in these countries because they have to pay lower salaries. And that's it. Here you have the most important industrial areas in the world. As you can see, mostly in the United States, Europe, and nowadays they are most of the industries are being displaced to mostly to Southeast Asia and to the country of China. And these are the traditional industrial areas in Europe. This is the summary, and finally we are going to end with the construction. What is the construction? The economic activity of the secondary sector in charge of projecting and building different structures. It can be housing, it can be industrial buildings, it can be infrastructures. There are several types of construction, and we can also classify buildings following their function. They can be residential, they can be religious, military, blah 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 blah. What are the main buildings that are constructed today? First, we have the city, the urban landscapes. For example, this with very high buildings called skyscrapers, los rascacielos. This is the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, 828 meters in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And besides of this, we have also the housing, the family housing. This is the most in use, or one of the most common types of buildings. This is a type of urbanization that has been exported by the United States all over the world. We can see this in Rivas, for example, in which we have a lot of single family houses. And this is an example in La Calle, Florida. And also we have this a lot of very beautiful new buildings. This is the Palm Islands in Dubai, which is an artificial island. And also we have infrastructures, which are roads, bridges, dams, and all that sort of constructions. Here a lot of pictures of beautiful interchanges in China, in Japan, in the United States, and finally in Spain, the most important, or well, most important, not the most important buildings, but the tallest buildings in Spain are these ones, the 4 skyscrapers in El Paso de la Castellana, las Cuatro Torres business area, and that's it. So this is the summary of construction, and this is the end of this unit. This is the project of Madrid Nuevo Norte in the district of Chamartín. Pues eso ha sido todo, señores. Espero que os haya servido de algo, y si no, pues ya sabéis dónde podéis... Bueno, y si no, pues me lo decís y os lo explico otra vez. Ya sabéis cómo: correo electrónico, el de Educamadrid, por el aula virtual, o incluso por el Instagram o por el Twitch, que lo tenéis aquí abajo en la cajita de descripción. Que tengáis felices fiestas y que tengáis feliz año. Me estará diciendo, ¿por qué me estás diciendo esto? Porque estoy grabando esto el día 30 de diciembre de 2021. Así que espero que las fiestas se hayan ido bien y espero que nos hayan dejado volver a clase, porque si no me voy a pegar un tiro. Venga, feliz año a todos, gracias y nos vemos en el próximo. Adiós.